Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Good to see you once again on this lovely mid-March Saturday. When is the Ides of March? What is that, the 13th?
I thought it was the 15th.
Like that.
Yeah,
Well, we safely got
just
through.
passed it.
We safely got through the Ides of March. So we can all thank our lucky stars for that. What was that? That was like Brutus and Caesar or something. That's what happens.
That's my best take on it.
Yeah. All right. Well, this will not be a classical history session. I will, however, introduce what this is. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour. And what we do here is we gather every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour. It's brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. Give me a second. I don't know if you all are hearing the sound when people join. I am definitely doing that. I'm going to turn that off so I don't get that notification. And then moving on, this is, again, Piano Tech Radio Hour is a little bit separate than Piano Technicians Masterclasses. It's this Saturday event, and along with the recording archive. You can subscribe to that for $16 a month. What you do is you get direct access to these Zoom calls each week. They're private Zoom calls, as well as the archival recordings of over 190 episodes in our member area. To join PTRH, you go to bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. If you're watching us out there on YouTube and Facebook, welcome. If this is your first time, we're glad to have you here and hope to see you again soon. We will probably be jumping off the live stream to Facebook and YouTube at around 15, 20 minutes in, just to encourage you to come and jump in on the Zoom. So we will share a link in the chats for Facebook, YouTube, which will help you see how you can jump in here. Actually, let me go to Emrys. Are you managing Restream at all? Did you turn on the stream over there by any chance?
Yes, we should be good to go. It looks like we're streaming.
We're streaming. Okay, great. Okay, excellent. So yeah, we will be able to put those links in the chats on YouTube and Facebook. And then additionally, I'd love to plug a couple of things before we jump in the show and meet our fascinating guest for the day. We want to make sure you guys remember our podcast. So this show gets released as a podcast, audio only. And for about a year, we've been releasing 2-year-old archival episodes. So you can listen to the podcast, you can listen to these sessions, but they're kind of like the older sessions. We just started integrating our newer recordings. So we're still getting the kinks worked out and posting those, but we've done a good job posting a handful of them. And so this session, if you wanted to catch an audio-only version, on the Piano Tech Radio Hour podcast, be out there in about a month. And if you want to go listen to the podcast, that's pianotechradio.com. We've got listeners all over the world. We've been in, the top 100, top 50, top 10, depending on the country, in performing arts podcasts on iTunes. And it's been really a fun ride with the podcast. Also, if you want written summaries and explanations of our masterclass content from the vault, these are lectures, with folks like, Mario Egrek or David Anderson or Sally Phillips. Keep an eye out for our blog, which we just launched about a month ago. That's pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com. So we create a Substack blog. You can also subscribe to that if you want and get delivery to your mailbox when new issues come out. But you can also just check out the blog at pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com. Make sure you go to social media, look at Piano Technicians Masterclass on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And then finally, I want to plug a masterclass coming up with Jason Castle. And we have an early bird pricing until March 16th today. I don't know if that ends today or tomorrow, so go check out the page. You can just go to our homepage, pianotechniciansmasterclass.com, and there'll be a notification to link to that page and sign up. That masterclass will be on harpsichords, and just making sure, if you're a technician out there and you run into harpsichords, you know what you're doing, you don't mess anything up. It's kind of getting the basic ground rules together so you can feel confident handling those instruments. All right, great. Let's head on into the main content of the show. I would love to introduce our guest for today. His name is Noah Frere. Welcome, Noah. He's been spotlighted here for a minute, so if you recognize him, you've already seen him. How's it going, Noah?
It's going good. How are you, Ethan?
Very good, very good. I'm going to read your bio. Let's get a little bit of background on this guy. So Noah's journey into piano technology began at the Randy Potter School for Piano Technology in 2006, sparked by a transformative encounter with the venerable Kent Webb, who tuned his Winter Spinet in Brooklyn, New York. And since then, Noah has navigated diverse roles. He's managed pianos at New York's Beethoven Pianos, and then also overseen a fleet of rental pianos at Carroll Music, also in New York. Noah actually, though, is currently based in Knoxville, Tennessee, where he's been researching the relationship between asteroids, S-types, V-types, I don't know what that means, but I know that's relevant, and meteorites via spectral analysis, among other things. So that basically means, yes, alongside his piano endeavors, he has pursued his passion for astronomy. He's earned a master's in physics at the University of Tennessee. And so unique among us already as a piano tuning astronomer, Noah also has taken a bold leap here in trying to reconcile the sometimes oppositional fields of astronomy and astrology. So this is going to be a fascinating session today. We're going to leap into the atmosphere, beyond our planet and reach for the stars and see some cool images and talk about astronomy. Then we're going to go talk about astrology a little bit and see what Noah has to say. I have to say I'm a little bit of a skeptic, but I also like to have fun talking about this stuff. And then Noah's got a piano that he's been working on, a Steinway. So he's brought in a little bit of content on that so we can touch upon piano, the very specific piano knowledge that you guys might enjoy and expect. And then we'll kind of get more into astronomy as we close out the session today. So Noah, welcome. Hello again. So tell me, we're gonna start like throwing up some images here. We put some considerable energy into making a hip little slideshow. So hopefully the viewers will enjoy that. And if you're listening on the podcast, I know, audio only content could be a little bit boring if we're just like, ooh, wow, that's a cool picture. So I'll try to give some descriptions, some descriptive patter about the images that we're looking at. So if you're just listening, you can still enjoy what we're talking about in the show. I remember, so Noah, let me give a little background. I met Noah in New York City when we were both living there. And this was before he was pursuing his degree in his advanced degree in astronomy. And I was actually pursuing a PhD in biology neuroscience at the time. And yeah, we just kind of got to meet a few times. But I forget when it was. There was one day where you and me were just talking, and I got this word that you're like, I'm gonna go study astronomy, and I was like, oh wow, that's cool, because it's kind of similar to my journey. Like how long had you been tuning before you realized that like you had this idea in your mind that you might go study astronomy,
Well, I mean, I'd only been tuning professionally probably 6 years, maybe 6 years.
Mm-hmm. And was that idea in your head before you even started tuning, or is this just kind of something that percolated up out of nowhere?
So about 3 years after I tuned, I got my first telescope. And so by that time 2010, I had moved to Tennessee, and I joined a astronomy club. And then I was in 3 astronomy clubs and reading a lot of articles about space. And so about 2 or 3 years after that, I decided to pursue astronomy. Now, piano tuning never got boring. It still is not boring. It's exciting. I love going to people's homes, and I love to see what's in their bookshelf about as much as anything. I like to see what kind of glass of water they bring, or if they offer me a water bottle, like why would they do that? And who are these people? I like the social aspect of piano tuning very much. But I guess after like 5 years of tuning pianos, during which time I was repairing and stuff too, refurbishing and learning player pianos, how player pianos work. That was all good, but like the passion for astronomy became overwhelming, where I just felt like I gotta go see what I can do with astronomy. So that's when I went back to school around 2014, I guess.
And did you get to finish all this before like the pandemic hit?
So
Were
I
you
think I got
done?
my master's during the pandemic year. I think it was 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just got out unscathed.
Yeah.
Studies
Hate it.
during that time were pretty annoying.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
well,
and
this is
I was finishing up, like I didn't even need to be, like I'd already taken all my classes. It was just research at that time. So I didn't
mhm.
have to take any of my classes online, which was really nice.
No, it's great. Well, let me start throwing up some images here because I kind of prodded you to give us some cool things to look at. So we'll start throwing these up here, and I guess you and I will walk through them.
Yeah.
All right, so let me get on this screen
Yeah.
to
And it's not like
share.
piano tuning led to astronomy in any way. They were completely unrelated. And they still, are unrelated colloquially. But one can relate any two things that one wants if one is creative. So
Yes, no, I agree. Yeah, definitely. There's and you always, I mean, I've often been attracted to people who you would maybe call like a polymath, right? Like they've got their fingers and toes in several different areas, and of course there's going to be integrations, and ways to mesh and meld those things if you do get into multiple things like that. So it makes sense. Um, all right, let's take a look at this image here. I'm gonna just describe it briefly for a listener. It looks like some sort of a satellite dish here, and kind of a nice sunset and some trees and like a lawn on a hill or something. What is this one? What is this one?
that's the observatory where I work when I teach astronomy. That's where I prefer to go with the students because that's where the telescopes are.
Okay, nice.
Out in the
And that is,
country, there's a good view of the Milky Way. It's an okay view of the Milky Way. At least you can see the Milky Way there, whereas you can,
uh
of course, never see the Milky Way in a city.
yeah. And is that a satellite dish? And what does it do?
It
Is
is,
it?
yeah, it's for radio astronomy. However, radio astronomy is one thing I have never really gotten into.
Hmm,
So I can't tell
okay.
you much about that dish. That was there before my time, and I don't even know if that is functional right now.
Okay. All right, let's hit the next one. Now we're going to travel into the depths of outer space right away here. So, this is now we're getting into a lot of your personal photography. I think almost all of this is your personal
Yeah.
photography. So, what are we looking at here?
So that's Jupiter, and you can see several of the bands, which are cloud structures. Um, and it's just one of the nicer photos of Jupiter I have. It's not spectacular by any means, but I'm not a spectacular astrophotographer, always working on it. But the cool thing about this photo is on the top of it, there's this little nub, and that is one of
Yeah,
Jupiter's moons that's just about to go behind the planet.
yeah, that's so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like well, part of what I really enjoy about this stuff is it helps remove you from the, the craziness that is our planet, and realize that there's more out there than this, and it's very far away. And just to be able to connect with a planet that far, even if it's blurry format, for me, it like harkens back to, you know, Galileo and all these
Yeah, for
guys,
sure.
folks that were seeing this stuff for the first time. It's still kind of fun to see it the way that they might have seen it, or
Yeah.
maybe even a little bit better.
Yeah, even better. Yeah, if this was zoomed out more, it'd look like a sharper image. It's so zoomed in there, it's a little blurry looking.
All right, what's this one? So this again, this looks kind of like a very starry scene
It's
on black background.
Yeah, it's a part of the Milky Way. And of course, the Milky Way is just the galaxy that we're in. So it's looking somewhere along towards the center-ish of the Milky Way. That's why it's so cloudy. The clouds are not clouds, it's dust and um, gas in space. And then there's a lot of like little details in there. For instance, about halfway between the center and the left,
Mhm.
halfway from top to bottom, there's a little structure there that kind of like down to the right a little bit. It's like a darker. So
Here.
that's like really cool. Like that is a beautiful little, you know, nebula. And it's not a great version of it, but you can see that if it was a better photo, it would have more structure. And there's all that nebulosity has a lot of structure, and with a really good photo, it really comes out. But this is, it's not bad for like a single Milky Way photo.
Yeah. But yeah, even if it's not bad, I feel like I look at it and just thinking about all those different stars being all way out where each and every one of them is, it's pretty
Yeah, and a lot of those
fascinating.
stars are double stars. But you
So
wouldn't
tell
know
me,
it unless you focused on one star individually where you could separate the two components.
yeah. Now we wanted to pull out something in the upper right-hand corner. There's a very salient part of the image,
Yeah.
which kind of looks like cylindrical here with a little
Mhm.
bright spot in the middle. What is that?
There's a little elliptical looking also. That is a separate galaxy that is outside of the Milky Way. It is the Andromeda Galaxy. And so it's amazing because you can actually see that with your naked eyes in a dark
Mm,
sky. You can't
mm,
see a lot of detail, but it looks kind of like a fuzzy spot in the sky. And it's
hmm.
the only thing in the entire northern hemisphere that you can see with your naked eyes that is not part of the Milky Way.
Oh, wow.
Because it's so close to us and it's so big.
Hmm.
And of course, you may or may not know it's on a collision course with the Milky Way. So after a couple billion years or whatever, I don't remember the exact number, we are being modeled to collide with each other, where the stars will then intermingle, and we will have a new galaxy created at that point.
I can't wait. Can't wait. I'm
I'm
gonna
looking forward to it
gonna
too.
have a little party at that time. Yeah, that'll be good.
Mhm.
All right, and then we got a little detail on that one in the next photo. Let's
Yeah.
hit this next one here. Tell us about this one. So again, just to explain, kind of like two dappled images left and right that look very similar, except one is kind of yellowish and one is kind of bluish on the right hand,
Mhm.
yellow on the left, blue on the right hand. But yeah, like kind of a dappled image of stars, some pretty big stars and speckled with smaller ones. So what is this particular image
So you may
or
have
set?
heard the phrase as someone who's coded, perhaps garbage in, garbage out, or something like
Hmm.
that.
Sure,
The,
yeah.
the challenge with astrophotography is one, getting good images in the first place, and you usually get like 100 or 200 or 300 or more images of the same object, and then you stack them all. And as you stack them, it brings out the detail. You like create one master image out of several other images.
Mm,
And so that's part of the challenge, is getting good images in the first place. The second challenge is processing those images to bring out the detail. This here is an example of my first try of processing on the left and the second try on the right. The colors are completely different because I use different algorithms and different processes to process. And so I just, being not very great at processing astrophotos and always experimenting, I don't do everything like the same way. I don't follow my same algorithm every time. Sometimes the color shifts. And if I'm trying to get more nebulosity to come out into the foreground, I might sacrifice some kind of color in order to get that nebulosity. So the left image is probably more accurately accurate in term. It's like 99% chance more accurate in terms of its actual color content.
hmm.
However, it doesn't have as much detail as the one on the right. So I
Hmm.
sacrifice color, but at least I have more detail.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to look and it's hard to hop back and forth between them. Actually, on the next slide, we're gonna split back and forth between the two images so you can kind of see the difference. So we're
Yeah.
going from the blue one to the orange yellow one, blue into the orange yellow one. Yeah, you can see some more things pop out when you pop on the blue image for sure.
Yeah. And I think I'm not sure. This might be the Heart Nebula. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
And when you say processing, what do you do to process the image?
You can use things
Is
like
it dig
Photoshop, and you
okay.
just you adjust the light curve. You make little
Mhm.
tiny micro adjustments to the light curve to bring out the light, and like without making it grainy. And then you stretch it, you bring up certain details, and there's just a bunch of different things. The astrophotography Affinity is the one I use, and
Mhm.
has a lot of astrophotography um,
Oh, like,
buttons that you can choose.
oh, okay.
So you can,
Cool.
like, for instance, if your stars are too bloated, which these are, you can actually reduce the size of your stars so that it looks sharper, and then you can sharpen detail, or you can get rid of the graininess. There's just a lot of different things you can do.
And this is a digital photo to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how long do you have to expose? Is it very
It
long
depends
thing
on
or is
the
it?
object, and it depends how many exposures you stack. If you are only doing one exposure and you're doing a nebula, then you want a
Mhm.
long exposure. But if you want to have a long exposure, like 60 seconds, then you
Uh-huh.
need to be tracking that nebula perfectly. If your telescope
Oh,
is not perfectly tracking the stars, then you will have star trails, and your nebula will just look like a noisy cloud. But if you're
wow.
taking short photos, like of 3 seconds each or 1 second each, then you don't have to be tracking as well. You still need to be tracking the stars, but you could be a little more off. And since you're such a quick exposure, there's less star trails. However, then you need like 100, if you want like 100 seconds worth of photos and they're 1 second each, you need 100 separate photos, which you then stack together.
Oh,
Generally, it's
okay.
advisable to take shorter exposures and more of them.
Okay. All right. I know we have some other stuff to move on to, so I'll jump into the next image here. This is beautiful image. This almost looks like a beach. Actually, I showed this to my son and I said, "Oh, this is my friend Noah. He, kind of took this picture of the stars. I think it's a beach." He said, "No, no, that's on Mars." That's what he
Mars.
said.
Oh, I wish it was. I would go to Mars if you offered me the chance.
But isn't this like a beachfront or something? Or
It
like,
is. It is the
yeah.
beach. Yep, that's the ocean, and then that's the main image kind of up above center is Orion, and then Sirius is, I think that's Sirius down below, the one that's like reflecting in the water. I
Oh,
think
wow.
it's Sirius. I'm not 100% sure.
hmm And then with this particular, is this on, is it, you can't get this in. I mean, where did you
Uh,
take this from?
this was in the evening, so the sun would have been on the other side of the sky. I
But
think this
what
was,
location?
where was this?
Yeah.
This
Was
is
it in
probably, it's
Tennessee?
definitely North Carolina. It might have been South
North Carolina.
Carolina.
Right, because you said it's the ocean, not a lake.
Yeah, and then you can
Okay.
see there's the Orion Nebula is visible. That bright spot about, right there, like about midway, a little higher, a little
Here?
bit down
Uh-huh.
to the left and to your left, Mark. That's the Orion Nebula.
Okay.
Bright spot there, which you can also see with your naked eyes. You can't make out any detail. It just looks kind of like a fuzzy spot in the sky, but it's a really beautiful nebula. It's very clear through a telescope. You can see a lot of detail, and there's, of course, gorgeous photos from thousands of astrophotographers all over the world. It's easy to get a photo of the Orion Nebula. It's hard to get a good photo, but it's easy to get a photo.
Yeah. And I see what you're saying about the star trails here.
Yep, you can
Like
see the
this is
star
probably one.
trails. Yep. Hmm.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
All right.
that picture was just with a regular camera. There's no telescope in this picture.
Wow. Okay. All right. We have a few different topics we want to move into. So next we're gonna hit astrology. From astronomy to astrology. And so we're showing right now a square image with Pegasus superimposed on the stars with a little outline of the galaxy, of the constellation. And it says Noah for astrology, mystic constellations. Tell us about mystic constellations.
Yeah, so that picture is Sagittarius. Is the Sagittarius constellation.
Oh, okay,
The
got it.
big blots of stars there. It looks like a teapot. I don't know if you can
Yeah,
see.
sorry, that's not a Pegasus. What are you? It's
It's
Sagittarius. Is
a
that a centaur?
centaur. Centaur.
Centaur. Yeah. Sorry.
And do you see the teapot? If I had my cursor active, you could see it, but there's a handle on the left, and then there's the cap, and then there's the main body, and then there's a little spout right where the arrow and bow is. So there's a
Okay.
very clear teapot outline there. That's kind of the chest of the archer and the bow and arrow and the head. Can you see the
Okay.
teapot structure?
Um, is
Yeah,
it?
you're outlining the teapot right now.
Oh, okay. So this is the
And then there's
pot. This is the top of the teapot, and here's the spout.
yep, that's right. So
Oh,
that
okay.
teapot is extremely recognizable when you're out looking under the night sky. It's always
Uh-huh.
in the southern sky if you're in the northern hemisphere. And it's kind of the heart of the Milky Way is in that area.
Hmm.
Sagittarius is where the heart of the Milky Way is located from our perspective. And so you can actually see the Milky Way rising out of the teapot like steam out of a pot of milk or something.
Mm.
So it's a very convenient located teapot in the sky. And then if you follow that stream, you can't see it in this picture, but if you're out in space in a dark sky, it literally looks like steam is rising from the spout of that teapot and spreads all the way across the sky, which is, of course, the Milky Way.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Beautiful.
it's a great constellation. So the reason I named it Mystic Constellations is because constellations are an
Wait,
astronomical.
named it. Did we say named it? I think this is your podcast. I
This is
don't
my
know if I said it or
podcast.
not.
Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
cover for my podcast. So Mystic
Yeah.
Constellations is the name of my podcast. Thank you for bringing that up. It's the name itself combines the spiritual and the scientific aspects of life. Because I am a scientist, since I teach astronomy at college, at the college level, I embrace science. It is very important to me to embrace science and to promote science. Involved in various spiritual circles, I have a lot of weird friends, and some of these people, I get the feeling they're kind of like anti-science, and I don't like that, and I'm always like trying to get people to be logical and rational and scientific. Doesn't mean you only have to be scientific in your life, but science should be embraced for sure. On the other hand, if you only embrace science, because the scientific process is very specific, you observe something, you wonder, you ask yourself a question, you formulate a hypothesis, you come up with a prediction to test it, you actually test it through some experiment, and then you note the results and come up with some conclusions, and then you circle around and revisit the hypothesis again. And you do that over and over forever. So science never actually proves anything. All it does is you just kind of get closer and closer to the truth through the scientific method. But it's also very dry and doesn't necessarily allow for as much intuition or imagination as some other things you can do in life. So,
Yeah.
but it's important to always promote science because it's what we do throughout our life anyway. Every time you do most of the things you do, you're actually using the scientific process subconsciously.
Yeah, like
know?
doing little tests and experiments. Is this going to
Yeah.
work? Is that going to work? And if you think about it, if you understand the scientific process, you can make those decisions more clearly as opposed to
Exactly. Once you
not really
actually deal
understanding
with
your
it,
decisions.
once you deal with it in a concrete way, it actually strengthens your ability to think critically. On the other hand, there's this whole other aspect of life which does not require science to embrace, and that's the spiritual aspect. Now, you can combine them as you will. You can have them be the same thing, I suppose, as well, like seeing the beauty in the scientific method, or maybe you don't need anything spiritual because like it's just not required. There's no necessary condition to being spiritual. However, many people find that spirituality is a distinct way of engaging with reality. And so that's where the word mystic comes in. So constellations refers to the actual science of the sky, and then mystic is the spiritual part. And I'm always trying to maintain a balance between those two things.
Yeah. Yeah. While kind of prepping for this, I ended up finding some video on YouTube, and they had pitted the astrologers and the astronomers against each other for some sort of, debate or something. And it was pretty funny to watch. I recommend
Great.
checking it out.
Who
But
won the debate?
well, I actually the video was of a guy who was one of the scientists that they utilized, and so he was presenting the whole thing and showing you, oh, I was on this show and they pitted us against each other. Da, da, da. So of course, the scientist won from his perspective, but but yeah, I think it's just fascinating to watch. All right, let's see. Should we hit this image and then we can maybe go on camera after we check this out for a minute, and then we'll go back to check out your piano. But yeah,
this is just me being creative and having fun. For me, a lot of life boils down to having fun, because if I'm not really sure why we're here. And so I try to bring fun into all the different aspects of life in one way or another. And here's a way of combining the musical scale and the different home keys with, various numbers of sharps and flats with the signs of the zodiac. So those things around the outer perimeter are the signs of the zodiac: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and so on. And then for the podcast listeners, inside of that, there are the keys C, G, D, A, E, and so on and so forth, the 12 keys of the piano keyboard, for instance. And they are arranged in such a way that is called the circle of fifths. It's a very convenient way of teaching music theory and of it's just convenient in terms of even like composing music. It makes a lot of sense, the circle of fifths. So my question was, how would I arrange the notes of the keyboard onto the zodiac? And this was my first thought. There are other ways to do it. This might, and no way am I saying this is the best way or even a good way. It was just the first way I thought of, and I wanted to try it and see what kind of comes up. So, I mean, we could go as much detail as you want about it, or we can just like leave it at that.
Well, I'll at least make one comment. I mean, first of all, let's see. C, is that Aries? Is that the symbol? Okay, and then G is Taurus, and D is Gemini, A is Pisces.
No, A is Cancer.
Oh, that's Cancer? Oh, I'm sorry. Which one's Pisces? Pisces is the waves?
It's to the left of Aries.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. See, I don't know these symbols.
But
anyways, but one thing that, I've composed some music and songs and written music and I did this experiment for about 4 months over 10 years ago. I called it Daily Wiki Music. And I would look at the Wikipedia article of the day, and then I would write a song about it. So I used the Wikipedia article as my inspiration.
Wow.
And that's kind of how I came up with ideas, right? There's no, like I said, there's no right or wrong way to seed your creativity. I also remember like looking into interesting ways that people explored creativity. The recording engineer and musician Brian Eno had this thing called oblique strategies cards, and he made a deck of cards. You would draw the cards if you were stuck, and it would give you just something to sort of think differently. It might say something like try it backwards, or more silence, or whatever.
That's awesome.
And so yeah, I could totally imagine, again, just get somewhere with your music, just to get some inspiration. You could write a cycle of cycle of music where you have 12 pieces, and not only are you writing them in all these different keys, but as you write in the key, you're thinking about, this particular sign and expressing it musically, right? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's basically a model. And by analyzing the model, you can realize new ways of thinking about any of the things in the model. If the model is new and if it's creative. It's a way of fine-tuning your own your own understanding of any system.
Yeah. So we'll get into we're going to take a look at the Steinway that you've been working on in a few minutes, but tell us more about your process of getting into astrology, because I think we talked about it. It's not, I would have thought maybe, you had always been into astrology and then the astronomy thing overlapped with it, but you actually kind of got into astrology because of getting into astronomy. Is that right? Or what was
the? Sure, it's because of, but it did follow.
Was a totally different trajectory. It just happened after.
It did come after, and it came kind of at first on its own. And I don't remember why I got into astrology, because it was very gradual and very general, and it was barely an interest at all at first. And then as I, started studying astronomy more and more, I guess the thing where they overlap is science can be so dry and analytical. And I was feeling like if I'm going to be doing this science for the rest of my life, I just wasn't sure if it would be able to occupy my spirit, brain, heart for the next 30, 40, 50 years. So I was like, I don't know, how many scientific papers can I read? How many scientific papers can I write? It's going to get boring. And I was like, what's not boring? Stuff that's creative, and just you get to make stuff up, and you get to use your imagination and deal with people. Like astrology is not boring at all. And you can literally make stuff up when you're an astrologer. Now, I'm not saying that astrology is therefore false or has no meaning, but you are allowed to be creative. You are allowed to use your intuition. Whereas with science, you can make stuff up, but then you got to test it. It's very, So I guess it's not that astronomy led to astrology, but it did kind of, it just kind of inspired as a reaction almost. It's like, where's the spirituality in this science? And it wasn't really built into it so much per se, not in the way that I needed it. So I started looking for something more spiritual that still had astronomy as part of it. And that is obviously spiritual astronomy, which is none other than astrology.
And tell me, a few ways. Maybe we can bring in some of these things that you and I had discussed previously, just kind of about now let's integrate like pianos
Okay.
and astrophysics and
Yeah.
and astrology. Like, how do you see these things connected?
All right. So I've never formulated a very good answer to this connection. I would have to write in order to do that, and the truth would come out in the writing, but I haven't sat
Hmm.
down to do that. So I can just kind of generally give you the best answer I can off the cuff.
Hmm.
Basically, when the planets go around the sun, they do so with an orbital period, and it takes a certain amount of time, right? And you could graph that as a sine wave. You can do the same thing with a piano string, and like just an octave. If you had an octave, a C4 and a C5 octave on the piano, you could compare that to one planet moving around the sun at half the speed of another planet, right?
Hmm.
So there's a very simple way of comparing piano strings and orbital resonances like that. Where astrology comes in is what does that psychologically have to do with our life? And if you don't believe in astrology at all, that's fine, but this part of the conversation would be meaningless to you. But if you have any interest in that at all, it's not hard to be creative and to kind of think of ways in which that might integrate into your life. So yeah, okay. So and I'd like to give you an example.
Hmm.
So there is Neptune, which goes around the sun every 167 years or something. I don't know the exact period. It takes a long time for Neptune to go around the sun, but it takes Pluto longer, about 248 years. If you send Pluto around the sun twice, you're talking about 500 years. You could send Neptune around the sun 3 times. It takes Neptune the same amount of time to go around the sun 3 times as it takes Pluto to go around the sun twice. There is a 3-to-2 orbital resonance with Neptune to Pluto.
Hmm.
Now, this is not like orbital resonances are important in our solar system formation and in maintaining the solar system. If there weren't, then some things would have been shifted and some planets would have been kicked out, and we might not be here on Earth anymore. There's just a lot of very specific things that have to happen to keep our solar system stable. And that orbital resonance is important because Neptune is a certain distance from the sun. It's around 30 times as far away from the sun as the Earth is. Pluto is on average around 40 times farther away from the sun than the Earth is. But Pluto is on a very elliptical orbit. It's not circular like this. It's like elliptical, like an oval. And so when Pluto gets close to the sun, it crosses over the orbit of Neptune. So your question might be, well, is Pluto going to run into Neptune someday? It's crossing over Neptune's orbit. That would be bad. Well, no, it won't. And it won't because the 3-2 orbital resonance keeps them at a specific distance away from each other at all times. Neptune never crosses Pluto's orbit at the same time as Pluto is there. So we're safe, right?
Mm.
And it's because of the 3-2 orbital resonance that keeps it that way. If they weren't, then at some point in the distant future, maybe a billion years away, yeah, Neptune might run into Pluto. But because of this resonance, we have stability. That automatically makes one think of pianos. Like, what makes a piano sound beautiful? Resonance, right? You have a 3-2, you can tune a fifth as a 3-2 fifth, where you take the third partial of one note and the second partial of another, and you have this beautiful fifth. And so then I was thinking, what if I tune the whole piano in 3-2 fifths? Well, then, as you pointed out the other day, Ethan, you would have the Pythagorean comma you would have noise
You
eventually.
basically have like just intonation, and
Yeah,
have a
you would
wolf.
get the
You have like
wolf.
a wolf fifth, I
You
think.
get the wolf fifth, and you'd have a terrible sounding piano.
Yeah.
But But so that whole thing then, like that's already interesting. But then when you bring the astrology into it, like what does that mean for our soul or how we emotionally deal with life? For instance, as an astrologer, I could look at your Neptune placement in your chart and tell you some stuff about your imagination and how you deal with your imagination. Or I would suggest things. I wouldn't tell you, I would suggest things.
Right.
And you would see whether or not they resonate with what I said. And then I would talk about Pluto for a while, and then you would be like, how does Neptune and Pluto, how do these ideas, how do the ideas of revolution or like you breaking things down to their essence and then rebuilding them and how you dream about your future, how do those things all relate together? And if there's a great dissonance in your own heart and mind between those ideas, then this is the crazy idea I had. I could tune your piano focusing on the 3-2-5th, for instance. Maybe we put a wolf fifth in there. Maybe
Mhm.
that would be, then when you play the piano, yeah, it sounds like really bad. It's in some intervals you're playing, but that might like emotionally trigger certain things in your own heart and mind that actually help you to deal with whatever issues you're dealing with. So that would be I've never done this. I never thought about it until this week, but that'd be a really creative way of bringing together piano tuning and astrology and astronomy.
Cool. Yeah, I love and I also find I'm almost certain that these type of different interests, right, bring ideas into the other. So like I'm thinking about equal temperament. So we're talking about how you have these 3-2 resonances, but if you have so many 3-2 resonances that are supposed to fit all together, but they actually don't, you get this Pythagorean common, but you have to kind of you have to widen them or narrow, widen the
Yes,
fourths,
yeah.
narrow the fifths or whatever in order to make it all harmonious.
Mm.
What's going out there in outer space that's similar, right? Where
Yeah,
it's supposed to like a 3-2 actually seems like it's almost 3-2, but it's not quite, and it's because it has to like stretch a little bit to fit somewhere else, right?
yeah, totally.
And seed you with interesting ideas.
Yeah, and
All
you
right.
could tune your whole piano in different ways based just on the planets, the solar system. I mean, that would be a really fun project.
That should be, yeah, that's going to be your custom service where you show up, you do the piano tuning and the horoscope all at the same time.
I mean, that'd be
You tune
great.
their piano in some special way. Maybe
I
have
would
some
love
sort of
that.
ceremony. All right. Well, that was really fun. Maybe we'll touch upon it a little bit more. But we wanted to talk about pianos very specifically here and a piano that you've been working on. I'm actually just noticing a fun coincidence. There's a little star on the what did
You're
you call
right.
that? Like the hubcap, not the
Yeah, I didn't
hubcap,
even realize
the
that.
rim of this tire. So again, let's describe the picture. It's a kind of rough and tumble scene here. It's almost like it's not a trash, it's not a dump, but
It
it's
is
like
a
a
dump.
warehouse. It's a
It is
dump.
a
Okay, so
dump.
it's a dump with piles of, debris. There's a trailer here and a kind of old piano just sitting out there looking abandoned. So tell us about this. And it says danger in a big red sign.
That
Do not
that is a
approach pits.
piano that was in my shop about 10 years ago. It was a player piano. I never fixed it. It went to my friend's shop. He never fixed it. Finally, it's like, let's get rid of this piano. We took it to the dump. That's what that picture is about. It happened the same day that I moved my Steinway Grand to his shop. So it was like, we were like,
Okay.
all right, we need space for my Steinway. Let's get rid of this old piano. Nobody needs it.
Okay. And then what's
That's the
this piano?
Steinway that I'm refurbishing.
Okay. And then this, again, to describe the picture, it's you kind of leaning up a piano on it, leaning against a piano on its side. But you're not leaning on it. It'd probably be a bad idea. But you're kind of standing next to piano being moved. It's got some keytops missing. It looks like it needs some work, but I guess that's part of why you found it interesting. So
Yeah.
here we're looking at the end of a keyboard section of the piano. There's
All right.
clearly like some really rough veneer falling off and cracking and stuff like that. What's going on here?
Oh, it's just the arm has been beat up. I think it's like a 1935 Steinway. I think I'm not
Mhm.
sure about that, but I think so. And it's just the veneer is all. I mean, obviously, I can't sell. I'm going to sell this piano
Okay.
unless I end up keeping it, but I'm planning on selling it. So I'm just going to refurbish it. I'm refinishing it, and so I got to put some fresh veneer on those arms.
And what's this one then? It looks like you're in that process. Is this the
Yeah,
same? This is the other arm though.
the
Let's
other
see.
arm. Yeah,
That's the other arm we're actually looking at. It looks like there's a piece of veneer partially glued on in a
yeah.
big sheet sticking up there, and then maybe it's going to be slowly but surely glued down to
Yeah.
meet the base wood?
So I decided to use, I am not a woodworking expert at all. So, but I've learned a little bit, hopefully, in my life. So I decided to use the stuff that where you put it on both sides and it sticks. What's it called? Contact cement.
Okay.
Now, I don't actually know if it's the best option. I mean, it would be better to use hide glue, but I didn't feel like it. I wanted to use contact cement, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, the next slide will show somewhat how it went.
Is it contact? But I feel like contact cement, is that the stuff that's supposed to be kind of like removable? That's
I
the
mean,
only thing I would be careful
I don't
careful
know.
about.
When the person buys this piano from me, if they call me back 5 years later and say, my arm veneer came off, and be like, oh, my bad, I'll come back and fix it.
Okay. Got it. All right, and this is the same thing from a different angle.
Yeah.
And then this is what after
So
you
that's
lay some veneer
after,
down?
yeah, and it looked pretty good. There was little gaps inside it that my friend came over. He's like, just redo it. I'm like, I'm not redoing it. It's pretty good. It's almost perfect. There's just little gaps in there. I'm just going to fill those gaps with some filler.
And you mean gaps in the seam of the wood where the
It was
two
like,
veneers come together, or
yeah, it was like in between the veneer and the base layer. So it's just it
okay,
wasn't fully, you
okay,
know, tight all the way through.
okay, got it.
It was
And
mostly.
then and then here we got a piece of sandpaper and what appears to be some sawdust there. What's going on here?
Well, I just sawed some, in order to fill up those gaps, I wanted to use the same color and largely wood. So I just sanded down some of the veneer into sawdust, which
And
then
then
in the next slide gets mixed with glue. And then the next slide, it is paste or
looks
putty.
like kind of looks like peanut butter.
It looks like peanut butter, yeah.
Don't
And
eat
then
it
I
though.
just filled with whatever gaps I found in that veneer, in between the veneer and the base of the
Okay,
arm.
just to give it. And then
Just
do
to
you
strengthen
sand
it,
it
make
after
sure it's
that?
tight. What's that?
You sand it after that, right? Or what
Well,
was your
it's
process of cleaning it
I
up?
like squeeze that into the gaps that I found in between the veneer and the arm,
Oh,
just to
okay.
fill up the space so it's solid. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Got it. All right, and now we're looking at two legs from the piano. It looks like one's got a finish on it, one doesn't. Is this you
Well,
sanded one down, or
yeah, the
what's
one on the
going on?
right's been sanded down. Yep. It's pretty wood. There's some
Yeah.
nicks and stuff in it because it's, old. That's
Is
all
this
right.
your is this your first sort of refinishing project? Have you done a lot of this
Nope,
stuff?
I've
Have you
done a
put
couple
veneer
before.
on?
I've done a
Okay.
couple, but I haven't done much veneer, very little veneer.
Okay. And then we got a little, this looks like it might be made from a coat hanger.
Yeah, it is indeed. I couldn't find any tools that curved around and were sharp because like that and those piano legs, I don't know if you saw in the last image, the well, you can't really see here, but on the above the piano legs on the piano on the side of the piano or and the
Uh-huh.
bottom of the legs even, there's just this very delicate scroll work and it was hard to get in those grooves.
Oh, okay.
So I couldn't find any tools that would do it for me. So I just decided to make one. So I just took a coat hanger and bent it and sharpened it a little bit and made a handle for it. It was
And then
helpful.
you would put sandpaper over it, or
So no,
would it?
that was just scrape out the old finish, the
Oh,
old
wow. Okay.
varnish.
And did you use like a finish remover, like a solvent, or did you just use
Yeah,
sandpaper? Yeah.
yeah, I was doing this in my living room, so I used a very innocuous remover. It's
Okay.
like citrus strip, I think it was called.
Yeah, I've used that.
Yeah, so it works okay, but not great. It certainly doesn't work as well as a toxic uh, product, but at
Right.
least our house was not evil to be in, and I didn't have a shop at the time. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Then we got some close-ups of the ends of that tool there.
yeah, so it's really hard to remove the finish with less effective removers, but that's okay. I mean, it takes longer, but at least it feels good. I don't have to wear a mask or anything.
Yeah, I liked it when I used it. It came out really nicely.
Yeah.
All right, and then we got a image here of a bottle of tung oil, Tung.
Yeah, it's a milk
Um,
paint brand.
okay.
It seemed like
And
a
is Yeah, tell us about tung oil. What do you do
You
with
know,
tung oil?
I haven't researched finishing in a couple of years, so I'm not going to be able to tell you a lot. I know the last time I refinished the piano, it was with Pollux oil, I think it was called, and
Hmm.
it works really well. It's kind of like I don't remember exactly what they mix, but it's something like, tung oil mixed with beeswax, mixed with something else. So it makes a nice, very strong surface. And that was great. It worked good. But this time I just wanted to go with pure oil. I just felt like it. There was really no other good reason, and that's what I wanted to do. And I like the way I think it looks nice, and I think it's sufficient to protect the wood as long as you take care of the wood and
So we got
don't.
a picture of a young lady applying this to the
That's my
piano. Starting to
daughter.
look pretty good.
That's my daughter. Yeah, and she's rubbing the tongue oil on there.
It's fun. She's taking it serious, definitely. Not
Yeah,
not a
yeah.
game.
Hmm.
And there's a picture of the top of the piano. It's looking pretty good.
I think
Looking
that's
nice.
got, yeah, 2 or 3 coats on, but I want to put probably 4 or 5 coats on total.
Very cool. And then we're looking at a picture of it looks like this is the edge of the lid. What is this?
Yeah, that's the edge of the lid. That's right.
And it's this has had the finish removed
Yeah,
and taken to the base layer. And then this next photo is after some applying the tongue oil, basically. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Beautiful. And so there's no color added. It's just this tongue oil. Does tongue oil have a color to it? I haven't done a lot of this stuff. Tongue oil
I
just have a natural color that comes out. It's not like you get different colorings of tongue.
I think it seems to darken the wood,
Yeah.
certainly, but I'm not sure color is the right. Maybe it has like an amber color. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Cool. And then this is what part of the piano is this?
That is also the lid, the front and the front part of the lid that you flip up on the bottom there, and then
Oh, okay.
it's just before and after tongue oil.
Cool. Yeah, that's looking very nice.
Yeah, so after it gets more coats, it should have more sheen.
All right. Oh, well, so that concludes our review of your Steinway piano refurbishment process. Is there anything else you want to say in closing that before we move on to the next
Yeah,
part?
Chuck Becker recommended that soy gel stripper by Fran Mar is much better than citrus strip. So thanks for that recommendation, Chuck. Soy gel, it's called.
Perfect. Can make a meal out of if you get a bunch of different strippers together, maybe some blackberry, something or other. I don't know. No, don't try that at home. Just kidding.
Or, or,
Um,
or at work.
um, all right, let's get back to some astronomy as we close it out here. This looks like quite a contraption we got set up. There's another young lady out here, out in front of like a forest scene with a some sort of like telescope camera-ish thing on a tripod that is covered in almost like looks like a Mexican one of those like jackets that you wear.
Yeah, that's a coat I bought in San Diego. That is correct. A hoodie. And as with many things in my life, I like to piece things together at the last minute. And so this is my wife, and this is my telescope with a camera inside it, and we're looking at a solar eclipse. But
Oh,
the there was a solar filter on top of. I'm trying to remember why we did this. I think there was a solar filter. Oh, I know what happened. I brought a solar filter and I brought a telescope, but I brought a solar filter that was too small for the telescope. So I had to like wrap it in something so it would fit inside the end of the telescope.
hmm.
So it's like the only way we could get the solar filter to be in the telescope.
Okay.
I don't know if
By
you
stuffing that in there. Yeah, I get it.
I had to makeshift something in order to see. We had to look at the sun. In order to look at the sun, you got to have a solar filter.
And then this next image is of a camera without the lens on it. What's going on there? EOS
Well,
1100D.
I'm not very smart. So what I did was look at the sun with my camera without putting a solar filter in there, even though I should know better. And it immediately started burning the inside of the camera. And so
Wow.
there's like, it's showing the flip mirror there, and it doesn't look
Uh-huh.
burned in this picture, but it is burned some. And actually
Uh,
it burned the plastic and it melted the plastic so that it's stuck in place. So it was
wow.
completely dysfunctional. So I had to like take off the lens, get my knife out and cut through the burned plastic, which had glued itself in a place it shouldn't be. And then I was able to get the flip mirror to work again, but it didn't work every time. It only worked some of the time.
Okay.
So
Wow.
don't
Yeah.
look at the sun with or without your eyes without a solar filter is the lesson there.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, tell you what'll happen to your eyes, I guess.
Exactly.
Um, all right, and then now we got an image. It's a white circle with a black circle kind of coming over it, but it looks like there's some sort of weird like sharkish type airplane bird
Sure.
thing in there. What's going on?
It is an airplane that was flying across the disk of the sun at the moment I took that photo, and that's this partial solar eclipse. So it was just such a cool, like, what a great coincidence. And so, yeah, that's what it is. But the thing is, that mirror got caught halfway up when it was trying to like fire
Oh,
its
okay.
like photo. So the lower
So that's
half
what
of
this.
that, yeah, was completely dark. And I took a separate photo where it did function correctly, but there was no airplane. And I combined those two images to try to give what it would have looked like if my camera hadn't malfunction at the moment I took the photo. So it's kind of like it's a combined two photos together, which is the best one can do, right?
Oh, this was me. This is me drawing three circles and trying to explain a solar or lunar eclipse to my
Oh,
son. I just left
nice.
that in there.
I see it. Yeah.
All right. All right, here's an image of like a towel on the ground with some interesting shadows on it. What's the deal with this one?
So during a partial solar eclipse, if you have light that's coming down to the ground and it is going through like a mesh. So for instance, you could take your fingers and try this during the next, remember the next solar eclipse is in like 3 weeks, right, guys? So go to the solar eclipse if you can, go to the center line where you can see totality. If you can't, then you can still see a partial eclipse from probably most of the USA. You can take your fingers like this and hold them over the sidewalk, and then the shadows and the light that's streaming through would normally just not create anything but what you're seeing, the little gaps between your fingers. But during a partial solar eclipse, every one of those little pieces of light that make it through are in the shape of the partial solar eclipse. In other words, they make little crescent shapes. And
Oh,
if you
yeah.
zoom in on those, you can see that they're crescents. The thing that made these crescents was the leaves. Just letting the light stream through the leaves of a tree creates those crescents. And it's very unique, interesting optical benefit of a partial solar eclipse.
Yeah, that's cool. And then here's a beautiful sky image, clouds and sort of a sun coming through the clouds, but it has a very unique sort of lighting aspect. What's this one?
Yeah, that was during the partial eclipse, and the sun is overexposed, which means you can't see what the sun looks like. But that happens when you take a picture of the sun, right? So it's
Yeah,
just an image of the sky during the solar eclipse.
cool. It's a beautiful one. I like it.
Yeah, it's
Ooh,
really
and
cool.
this one's very magical. It's the moon. It's kind of got an orange pinkish flavor to it and a few stars speckled around. But
Yeah.
a beautiful picture of the moon. What's this
Moving
one?
into the lunar eclipses. Yep. This is when the shadow of the Earth covers the moon.
Mm. And so that difference in shading is just caused by the shadow of the Earth is starting to approach to cover the moon. It's not there yet, but
In
it's sort of
this
changing the coloring a little bit.
in this specific picture, this was pretty much, if it wasn't a total lunar eclipse, it was very close to total. Even during a total lunar eclipse, you can have slight gradations in color because the moon, the Earth, the shadow of the Earth is much larger than the shadow of the moon. And so if the moon isn't like smack dab in the middle of the Earth's shadow, you might have some differences in how the light is striking the moon. Why is the moon red during a lunar eclipse?
That's the question I'm asking you.
So it's red because if you can imagine the sunlight is going around the Earth
Hmm.
and then it keeps on going past the moon, but the moon is in the shadow of the Earth.
Hmm.
However, the light that's going around the Earth bounces off the moon and comes back to the Earth. You are seeing light that's reflected off the moon back to Earth. However,
Hmm.
the light that made it to the moon in the first place has to go around the Earth. What
Ah,
happens when the moon goes at an oblique angle, like tangent to the Earth's surface? Well, you know what happens when you see sunrise or sunset. All of the sky becomes red. So
ah,
the wavelengths of light that are making it past the Earth and bouncing off the moon are sunset and sunrise rays.
hmm,
All the only light that we're seeing are reflections of sunrises and sunsets
hmm.
that are global. So essentially, you're seeing all of the sunrises and sunsets at that moment on the Earth reflected back to you, and that's why it's red.
That's kind of fun.
Mhm.
All right, and this next one is a sequence of images, several moons with various shadings and colorings, and it looks like a sort of a time sequence. What's this one? It says total
Yeah.
lunar eclipse November 8th, 2022.
So that's the top photo there is when the shadow of the Earth was first starting to cover the moon, and then it increased in coverage until it got to full
Seventh
eclipse,
and
which is
second.
kind of down below in the middle.
Hmm.
The reason there's such a jump in between if you take the third picture from the top and then look at the fourth picture from the top,
Hmm.
the third and the fourth moon, reason that
Yeah.
looks so different is the exposure time in the camera.
Oh, okay.
I exposed much longer exposure for the fourth moon, so it looks really bright where the moon is. That orange part of the moon in that
Hmm.
fourth moon is actually the part that's in shadow, right? It's the shadow of the Earth.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the eclipse is down at the bottom of that image, and there's a tree, and that second one from the end, that's like a tree top because the moon was starting to get real low in the horizon.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so I'll cut in here and just say we typically end around this time, but I'd love to just wrap this up and because we have some other really cool images, and so we might go a little longer than we typically. Does that work for you, Noah?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, awesome. We'll try to make it quick. Here's just a different way of looking at that, so we can look at those images of the moon a little closer. Um, and then this is has a little here's an image similar to the ones before of just one of the moon pictures. There's a purple circle superimposed upon the moon that has its circumference out overlapping with the shadow on the moon. And it says Earth's shadow is 583 over 232, 2.5 times the diameter of the moon. What's going on here?
So when you take an image of the lunar eclipse, you have this, shadow line. And so I just thought, well, let's do some physics. So I completed that circle to the best that I could. I just drew a
Eyeballed
circle
it.
that fit that shape of that shadow, and then I
Hmm.
calculated how much bigger is the shadow, which is the shadow of Earth. That purple shadow, that purple circle represents the shadow of Earth.
Hmm.
And then how much bigger is that than the moon? And based on that information, you can calculate the distance of the moon from the Earth using trigonometry.
Okay, cool. And then this next one is a very similar. You said you have a pink circle or purple, what you're saying, which is your original best guess, 2.5 times the moon. The gray circle is the calculated best based on moon Earth distance at perihelion. Shadow is 617 over 232 equals 2.66 times the moon. Notice the similarity between these two arcs that are enclosed within the moon has difficulty in blindly drawing the correct size circle. So you're saying that the calculation in gray here is a little bit more accurate because it's based on
Yeah.
actual
Data. Yeah.
number that you started with, numbers that you
Yeah. But
started with. Yeah.
And it's easy to see the difference in the purple and the gray circle when you see the whole thing, but when you're only
Yeah.
seeing a small part of the arc, it's difficult. And so having limited information makes it difficult to see the big picture.
Yeah. Well, you know what this reminds me of? You don't know, but it's the Fermi piano tuner problem. Are you familiar with that?
No, tell me.
So it's I've come across it several times, probably because I've done stuff with technology and pianos. But it had been a common question for like interviews for like programmers or people in technical jobs, and it's to test your ability to ballpark figures. And so the question is, I think it's like estimate the number of piano tuners in New York City or something like
Oh,
that. And you're supposed to just kind of think, okay, what's the population in New York City? How many people do we think have pianos? How many tuners would you need to serve them? Da da da. And you come up with like a number. Versus you and me would be like, I think I've met most of them, so it's probably, X.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, that
but
sounds familiar now that you
but
mention
yeah,
it.
similar. It's kind of a cool, you can do a pretty nice job getting a rough figure without having to do all the complex math.
Yeah, that's right.
It's also a demonstration of, sometimes when we're asked those questions to figure something out, we envision in our heads what we're seeing right here, right? You say, oh, what's the ratio between the size of the shadow of the image on the moon and the moon? And then inside your head you're going, oh man, I got to get out a pencil and paper and I got to draw. And I'm describing what's on this basically a whiteboard here. Draw a triangle with a couple overlapping lines, mention the tangent, and a big number, 93 million for some representing some size of something or other, and I've got to use R and Y minus X minus Z, blah, blah, blah. Versus if you just kind of think of it sort of in a more creative way, you can come up with a pretty close number instead of having to do the calculations. But I guess this is that what this is, right? This is you doing the actual calculations.
Yeah. Hmm.
And what input is required there? What numbers are
Um,
you using as your input?
well, the input that we know already is 93 million miles. That's the distance from the sun to Earth,
Okay.
average distance. The diameter, or let's see, I haven't seen this in a long time. I think
Like the diameter of the sun or some.
yeah, the diameter of the Earth, there's 8,000. The diameter of
Mhm.
the moon, we know. And so then once you have some of those inputs, you can draw a triangle, basically. And then my goal was to calculate how far away I think the moon was from the Earth based on those triangles. And then
Oh,
compare it to the real answer. You can look up the real answer on using an astronomy program. I mean, I did this several years ago, but we seem to be looking at something like that. Mhm.
cool.
And you may
I'll
have
have to
heard
check
of the small angle approximation. When you have very small angles, the tangent of theta is essentially the same thing as theta itself. The tangent of the angle equals the angle, which is helpful.
Oh, okay. All right. And we have a picture of my new record, 28.4 days old, 1.4%
This
illuminated, October
photo
13th,
of the
23.
very fine crescent moon, and it's only 1.5%, 1.4% illuminated. So it's just such a beautiful moon to see. You could barely see it, you know?
Yeah.
And I love finding crescent moons that are barely visible.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a handful of pictures here of you moon chasing, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm a
One
moon
is
chaser.
nice little bit. You're just driving down the road at nighttime. You got a good
Yeah,
picture on the highway. Here's a mountain. Is that, yeah, some,
it's a
mount
hill. It's a hill.
hills. Yeah, hills. But it's beautiful color. It's like the moon, but it's like the color of the sun.
Yeah.
And
That's a
and
moon
then
halo. So it's like the moon in the sky, and then around the moon is a halo. And it's basically just the way the moon's light refracts off certain kinds of atmosphere.
yeah, moon looks giant in this picture.
Yeah, the farther away you are from the foreground objects, the bigger the moon looks. So the moon doesn't change size from our point of view when you take a photo. It only changes size relative to the objects in the foreground. Like, so if you're looking at the moon and it's on the horizon, it looks bigger. You're like, wow, that moon is really big. And then you see it up in the sky, you're like, oh, the moon's gotten smaller. It didn't. It did not change size. You can measure it. It's the same. But since the foreground objects like affect our view, it looks much bigger when it's on the horizon.
Mm-hmm. Here's another one, kind of in the forest by like a little pond or lake.
Yeah.
And is this the same area, this next one?
Yeah,
Or
it's
is
the
that
same lake. Yeah,
yeah, the same
same
lake, but
day.
another view.
I need a better
Got some
camera.
cool reflections on the water of the forest and
Yeah.
a very light moon. Actually, we can hardly see it in this image.
It's always a
But
surprise too. It never ceases. Like I'm driving and then there's the moon rising. I'm like, whoa, there's the moon. Always beautiful. And that's another thing. What combines astronomy, astrology, and piano tuning? The quest for beauty. Like finding the beauty in things.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so now we have kind of a similar crescent moon in this image, but there's also like a little firework going on over here on the left-hand side. What's that?
That is a comet. That was my first comet photo.
And do you capture a comet accidentally, or do you know a comet's going to be
No,
visible
I
on
knew
it?
that was there. I brought, it was like 10 years ago. It was my first telescope. It was this tiny little Celestron telescope. I brought it out to the parking lot of a church that I knew was kind of on a hill and had a good um, view of the western horizon. And you have to know where to go. You got to make sure there's no trees in your way, for instance. So I knew that comet was there. I didn't know I'd get to have the moon in the same picture. That was pretty great. But that is through the telescope. That's a telescopic image.
Cool.
And you can see
Uh,
the moon, the part of the moon that you can't normally see in the last picture. See how
mhm.
there's structure there and
Oh
detail?
yeah.
There's a word for that. It's called earth shine. So what happens is
Oh.
the light bounces off the earth from the sun. It travels over to the moon, strikes the moon's surface, bounces off the moon and back to the earth again. So you're
Uh-huh.
getting like this ping pong effect of light. And so you're seeing, the moon that's come to Earth, over to the moon, and then back to the Earth again. So it's called Earth shine because it's reflected light from the Earth off the moon.
Mm-hmm. All right, the next one is a comet through some trees. Got a very mystical quality.
Mm-hmm.
And this one looks more like out in space, like among a lot of stars here. It says
Yeah.
Comet C 2022 E3 ZTF. Um, what's that?
I don't remember what ZTF stands for. Um, I don't know. I can't tell you what all
All
the
right,
name means.
very cool. And now is this a comet too? This
Yeah, and you
next
can
one?
see the tail above it. It almost
Here?
looks like there's two tails because comets do
Yeah.
often or perhaps normally produce two tails. One is an ion tail and one's a dust tail, and they face different directions because they're composed of different things and they're affected by gravity and the sun differently.
And this is interesting because if I look at the stars, they
Hmm.
kind of have a purple and white type of tone, but the comet is kind of like a turquoise
Very green, yeah.
cyan type of color.
Yeah, the star colors are resultant from their temperature. Colors are directly related to temperature in stars. And the comet color is probably more related to the chemistry.
Mm. Is this another comet as well?
Yeah.
Cool. And here's a beautiful picture of, I guess this is the Milky Way.
Yep, that's the Milky Way. Yeah.
I was curious, there's some sort of jagged edges here at the top left of the picture. Is
Part
that
of
just,
part of
yeah,
that is just my photo
that's
processing.
your photo processing?
Probably most of it is. It does look very unnatural, doesn't it? So I don't even remember seeing that before. And you can
So
see
it
how
makes
the stars are like elongated in the corners.
mm-hmm.
That's a result of the optics of the telescope. Like in the
Mm,
bottom left corner and the top right corner,
yeah,
almost like you're traveling through space, like in like a science fiction movie. That's just
yeah.
because the optics on telescopes are subject to error unless you have a really good telescope.
Here's
And
a
you can correct for
closer,
that stuff if you know how, but it's a big deal.
here's a closer view of that picture. Really cool.
Yeah.
And then is this also the Milky Way?
That's the Milky Way too,
Is
and
this the
that's an
same
airplane.
Andromeda?
Yeah, that's Andromeda, and there's an airplane in there, and there's a meteor in there. You can tell the airplane's an airplane because it's perfectly straight, and the same size, but the meteor has a variable width in the streak, which means
Uh-huh.
it was like burned up as it entered the atmosphere.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
Oh
and you could
wow. Okay,
track.
so when it's thicker, it's actually there's more meteor there, and then
Yeah,
it dies basically at the end.
yeah, and if you tracked, probably, I'm not 100% sure about that. That does stand to reason, but I could also imagine it being the other way. But you could track that meteor back to its source, and then, or some potential source based on where it might have originated. And then you can perhaps, depending on the time of year, you might be able to know like if it's a Geminid from the Geminid meteor shower or one of the meteor showers, or if it's just like a random meteor.
All right, here's a closer view of that one. And then here's a cool night sky again. Looks like am I looking at your camera lens as
That's the
well?
telescope, and
Oh,
this is
telescope.
a regular camera shot, but the camera was sitting on top of the telescope.
Okay.
So
How
it
long
was
do you have to expose to get that?
I took this like over 10 years ago, and this was a film camera. I don't remember what the exposure length was, but it was probably a few couple minutes. If you look at the leaves in the background of the trees, see
Yeah.
how they're kind of streaked?
Yeah.
That means the camera has been moving a little bit. I was
Right.
trying to follow the stars, which means the foreground objects would be blurry. So that
Gotcha.
image, maybe it might be a couple or few minutes,
Okay.
but I like the
And
way the
then
colors came out in that.
yeah, beautiful colors. And then now we have overlapping here a bunch of little thought bubbles with or speaking bubbles with numbers and letters in them, and then some lines drawn over here, superimposed that you added to the image. What are those?
Yeah, those are just the names of various features in the sky. Usually they're nebulae.
Cool.
Plural.
M11, M26, M14. So this is you said this is kind of when you were getting to learn about these things, and it was kind of fun to be able to locate them
Yeah, that's
on a
right.
picture.
Identify them. Draw the constellation line, the asterism lines in the constellations. For instance, M16 is the Eagle Nebula, and you've seen photos of the Eagle Nebula probably at some point in your life that Hubble produced, and there it
Hmm.
is in the photo, looking not
Cool.
as amazing as in the Hubble photograph. There's the teapot.
Oh, okay, got it. That's the teapot.
Yeah,
Nice.
see how the Milky Way is rising out of it?
Yeah. Um, and then butterfly galaxy, I guess, or butterfly.
That might be a cluster, an open cluster. I can't
Okay.
remember for sure. There's a lot of open clusters that are clusters of stars.
All right. And then is this a galaxy? What's this
That is a
next one?
nebula. It's called the Lobster Nebula because it looks like a lobster and it's mostly gas and dust. But there's a lot of it. It's like huge swaths of gas and dust that are, way larger than our solar system.
Yeah. I don't see the lobster, but
Well,
I do see
sideways,
maybe
it's
it
like
tilts our
facing
head.
down. There's a tail at the top.
Oh, I do see what looks like a claw. Is that maybe?
Well, the tail is at the top. There's like an arm on the left with a
Okay.
claw, maybe, and then the body is like the main meat of it with a head at the
Yeah.
bottom.
Yeah. If I tilt my head, I can see it actually. Look
Hmm.
closer. Cat's Eye Nebula. That one's really cool.
Yeah, it's got a cool shape.
So yeah, this one is just on a black background, a couple of stars. They're like a spirally blue type of. That's
Hmm.
almost like reminds me of the spirographs we did when we were kids.
Yeah, it does.
The way
And
that the
different things
geometry
cause
goes.
nebulae. Sometimes they're caused from a star that's expanding and it's blowing off all of its layers. Sometimes it's caused from a supernova that exploded, and you're looking at the remains like of a dead star. Sometimes it's caused from a bunch of gas and dust that's floating in space, and the starlight's reflecting off of it.
All right, and then we have this says M82. So
Mhm.
this is a
That's a
nebula as
gal
well.
that's a galaxy.
Oh, this is a galaxy.
You can't see it with your naked eyes, but you can see through a telescope pretty easy.
The colors in this particular image really cool because it's like basically black and white everywhere with the space and stars, but in the actual galaxy, there's some cool reds and oranges and blues in this image.
Yeah, there's really, if you look at really high quality images of this, it's just the detail is amazing. It's beautiful.
Um, Awesome. Well, this is our last space photo. I know we have like two more photos here. Oh no, what is this? Is this the same one? It's just a
Yeah, I think
different
that's M82
picture.
also. Yeah.
Cool. It's beautiful.
Mhm.
Now we go to bonsai trees. We're not going to talk about it, but just a little afterthought. You are a
Yeah,
bonsai aficionado in addition to all of this.
I
We thought
try.
we'd share a couple fun photos of that stuff.
Yeah.
But there was one more. Okay. Um, well, thank you very much, Noah. I'm glad we were able to stay over a little bit. I appreciate that. This is very fun, and thank you for sharing a little bit of your interests in your life with us, and uh, and a bit about pianos, and yeah, good
Thank you,
time.
Ethan. Yeah, thanks for
Any
having me.
any final thoughts? Where can people go to like check out your astrology podcast or
Oh,
about what
well,
you're
my
up to?
name is Noah Frere, and so the easiest place is just to go to my name.com, noahfrere.com.
Okay, and that's Frere, yeah.
Yeah, and if you wanted to find the podcast, it's on, Apple Podcasts or Spotify or on YouTube, and it's the new name is Mystic Constellations, or you could just search for Noah Frere, it'd probably come up.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'll since we're quite a bit over today, I'll sign us off. I'll say thanks for joining today. If you just joined us today for signing up for this session, individually, of course, you can make your life more convenient. Subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour, $16 a month. You get the recording of today's session, a member area, automatic registration for each week's new session. Sign up there at bit.ly/join PTRH. We've reached the end of another musical journey here. And again, thank you to Noah and our live audience for joining. We're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction for piano industry masters without leaving your home. And yep, it's been a blast. And I guess we'll sign off there and we'll see you all next week. Bye bye.